The weakest species. In the great halls of the Galactic Union, laughter echoed. Big, loud, mocking laughter. It came from creatures with scales, claws, wings, and fire in their veins. They laughed because the humans were here. Small, soft humans. No armor, no natural weapons, just thin skin and strange eyes that showed too many emotions. They call this a warrior. One alien said, pointing at a human ambassador standing near the council table. This species can't even survive their own winters without jackets. More laughter followed. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had just joined the Galactic Union a few years ago. Other races didn't take them seriously. They looked weak. They acted strange. They smiled too much. They asked too many questions. And they talked about hope, a word most alien races had forgotten. But the galaxy was not laughing for long. A new enemy had arrived. The Karkal. Monsters from the edge of space. Twice as tall as any alien warrior. Bodies covered in black metal-like skin. Sharp red eyes that glowed even in darkness. The Karkal didn't talk. They didn't ask questions. They only destroyed. Planet after planet fell. No one could stop them. The Galactic Union sent their strongest warriors. They died. They sent ships. The ships burned. They sent spies. The spies never returned. Fear spread fast. Entire systems begged for help. And then, as a joke, someone said, "Let's ask the humans." The room had laughed again, but not for long, because the humans said yes. The Union expected a large army. They got something else. Just one person stepped forward. A woman. She wore no grand armor, just a long black coat, boots covered in dust, and a weapon strapped to her back that looked too old to matter. Her hair was short. Her face was calm. But her eyes held something cold, something sharp. Not anger, not fear. Focus. "What is this?" An alien general asked. "Where is the human army?" The human ambassador only smiled. "She is the army." The room went silent. The woman stepped forward. "Where's the battlefield?" she asked. They flew her to the front lines. A ruined moon near the edge of Karkal territory. Ashes floated in the air. Metal bones of broken ships lay half buried in dust. The sky was red from fire and smoke. She stood alone. Alien commanders watched from orbit. Cameras tracked her every step. Some expected her to run. Others expected her to die. Instead, she knelt and touched the ground, closed her eyes, listened. Then she moved. Fast. She climbed broken towers like a shadow, planted strange devices in the dust, marked spots with small stones. And then she waited. An hour passed. Then a Karkal patrol arrived. 5 monsters, armored and armed. She didn't hide. She stood in the open, one hand on her weapon. The creatures charged, roaring like beasts. The first one never reached her. It exploded, stepped on a hidden mine. The second lost its leg in a trap. The third was shot in the throat before it could aim. The last 2 hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation, she was already moving. She ran forward like a storm. Her blade cut through the air with deadly speed. She didn't scream. She didn't speak. She just ended them. 5 Karkal dead. In under a minute. The commanders watching from orbit said nothing. One of them whispered, "How did she know they'd come?" Another replied, "She planned it." Like she knew their steps before they walked. But how? The ambassador only said, "She studies her enemies. She watches, learns, adapts. Then she strikes." The alien general frowned. "Is she some kind of elite human?" The ambassador shook his head. "No, she's a survivor." Later, reports came in. The Karkal sent more squads. None returned. Traps were everywhere. Shadows moved without sound. Bullets came from nowhere. Bodies disappeared. One Karkal scout survived, barely. It was found crawling through the dirt, wounded, whispering in its own language. One word repeated again and again. Huntress. The Huntress didn't stop. She kept moving. She didn't sleep much. She ate when she could. But her mind was always focused, always watching. She wasn't fighting for glory. She wasn't fighting for revenge. She was fighting to prove one thing: that humanity was never weak, just underestimated. By the end of the week, the battlefield was silent. No more carcall moved in that area. The Galactic Union received the report. Zone cleared. 1 casualty. All enemy. Underneath it, a single signature. The Huntress. The first strike. The carcall did not believe in fear. They believed in crushing it. Their soldiers were built for war. Bones like steel, skin like armor, minds trained to obey. 1 Huntress. That was nothing. Just a strange human with lucky traps and a fast hand. So they sent more. A whole squad of their elite. These weren't patrol grunts. These were blood-born hunters, trained killers from birth. Bigger, smarter, meaner. They didn't charge like beasts. They moved with strategy. Precision. A clean sweep was ordered. Find the human, their commander said. Break her bones. Drag her back screaming. But the carcall had made a mistake. They thought they were the hunters. They didn't know she had been hunting them all along. From orbit, the alien generals watched closely. It was dusk on the battlefield. Shadows stretched long over the rocky ground. Fires still burned in the distance. A cold wind moved across the dust. The Huntress was waiting. She stood on top of a broken carcall tank, her coat blowing in the wind. The sun behind her made her look like part of the wreckage, silent, still, deadly. Then she disappeared. The carcall squad landed half a mile away. 8 elite soldiers, armored, armed, confident. Their scanners picked up nothing. No heat, no sound, no movement. Too quiet, one of them said. It's a dead zone, another replied. She ran. But the lead hunter frowned. His instincts screamed no. Then the ground exploded. 2 of them vanished in fire, minds placed under dust. A third was pulled into a pit of sharpened spikes, screaming. The rest opened fire in all directions, but there was nothing to shoot. The silence returned. 1 carcall shouted, "Shejo wo yourself." And she did. She dropped from above like a shadow with a heartbeat. Her blade moved faster than the eye. 1 cut, 1 fall, 1 dead. Then she vanished again. The carcall panicked. They fired at rocks, at smoke, at each other. Their sensors jammed. Their radios screamed static. And from the darkness came a sound. Not a voice, but something worse. A whistle. Soft, slow, steady, like someone walking. Step, step, whistle. Step, step, silence. 1 carcall turned in time to see nothing but her eyes. Then, darkness. From orbit, the generals watched the feed flicker. One by one, the helmet cams went dark. The last soldier's feed was shaky. He was breathing hard, running. "She's not human," he cried. "She's death wearing skin." The feed cut out. Silence. Hours later, only 1 cam came back online. It showed the Huntress. She stood in the center of the battlefield. Around her lay the remains of the bloodborne squad. Burnt, broken, finished. She looked straight at the camera. Then she raised her weapon and carved a symbol into the ground. A simple circle with a slash through it. A message. Send more. Then she walked away. Back in the Galactic Council, no one laughed anymore. A blue-skinned diplomat spoke softly. "She hunts like one of us, but she's not. She uses fear like a weapon." The human ambassador didn't smile. He just said, "She's still learning." "Learning what?" an insectoid asked. The ambassador stood, voice calm. "How to break an empire." Meanwhile, deep in carcall territory, A warlord slammed his fist on the table. "This is not a warrior," he growled. "This is a ghost." Another Karkal, older and wiser, spoke with caution. "She's something worse," he said. "She's a message." Blood in the dust. The battlefield was quiet, but not peaceful. Not after what happened. 8 of the Karkal's best had gone in. None came out. Now, every soldier on the front line knew her name. They didn't say it with anger. They said it with fear. The Huntress. Some said she wasn't real. Others said she was already dead and came back for revenge. But one thing was clear. The Karkal were bleeding, and she was still out there. On a dead world called Varnak 6, the air was thin and bitter. The ground was red with dust and blood. The Karkal had taken it weeks ago, burned the forests, killed every life form, built towers of metal and bone. Now, they were losing it. Not to an army, to one woman. She moved through the ruins like smoke, her steps silent, her eyes sharp, her coat dark with dust and battle scars. In her hand was a simple weapon, part sniper rifle, part blade, modified, human-made, deadly. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She waited, and the enemy always came. One squad of Karkal marched down the ruins of an old city. Buildings crumbled. Fire cracked in the distance. They didn't speak. Then one stopped. His armor's targeting system blinked. A soft beep. A warning. Target above. He looked up. There was no one there. Then he looked down. His last mistake. A wire snapped. The street collapsed beneath him. A trap. Explosives hidden in the rubble blasted upward. The entire squad vanished in fire and dust. From the shadows, the Huntress watched. She marked something in a small notebook. 8 down, 12 to go. She turned, silent again. A predator. But this time, someone saw her. Not an enemy. A young alien, barely a soldier, was hiding in a broken building. He'd been left behind after the last attack. Wounded, scared. He heard the trap explode. Then, footsteps. He held his breath. The door creaked open. She stepped in. He raised his weapon, hands shaking. "Stay back." She didn't speak. She didn't aim. She just looked at him. Tired eyes, cold eyes, but not empty, not cruel. She walked past him, slowly, tossed a small med-kit beside him, then kept walking. He sat there, stunned. Why? Why didn't she kill me? Then he saw what she had carved into the wall with her blade. Only killers die today. Word began to spread. Among enemies. Among allies. She didn't kill for sport. She didn't kill for medals. She killed for control. She studied battle like a language. She turned war into art, and she used the enemy's strength against them. On Varnak 6, one alien commander watched from a drone feed. He had seen warriors. He had been a warrior. But this was different. "This human," he said, "doesn't fight to survive." "Then why does she fight?" another asked. The commander leaned in, eyes wide. "She fights to teach us fear." And the Karkal, they stopped laughing. They stopped speaking. They started running. One soldier dropped his weapon during a patrol. Why? He heard a soft noise behind him. A whistle. Step, step, whistle. He ran. Didn't even look back. His commander found him an hour later, curled in a crater, eyes wide, whispering. She was watching me. She was smiling. Far from the front lines, on a peaceful human colony, a young girl watched the newsfeed. She saw a photo of the Huntress standing among smoke and wreckage. She didn't look like a hero. She looked like someone who had nothing left to lose. The girl looked at her father. "Is she real?" The father nodded. "She's more than real. She's the reason we're still here." Back on Varnak 6, The last Karkal warlord on the planet stood on a hill, roaring into the night. "Come out, human. Face me." A voice answered. Not loud. Not close. Just behind him. "You first." The warlord turned. Nothing. Then, steel in his chest. A blade. A whisper. "Now you bleed." The war ended on Varnak 6 that night. No one saw the final battle. Only the aftermath. One warlord's body. Dozens of enemy corpses. And in the dust, a symbol burned into metal. The circle. A slash. The mark of the Huntress. Fear spreads. The Karkal stopped sending patrols. Not because they were out of soldiers, but because no one came back. Entire zones went quiet. No gunfire. No reports. No survivors. Just dust. Just silence. And one name whispered through the blood-soaked air. The Huntress. She had no rank. No flag. No army. But she had something more dangerous. Control. She didn't need to destroy entire battalions. She only needed to make them afraid to move. And it was working. On the planet Threx 9, a group of alien mercenaries refused to land. They circled in the sky for hours, waiting, watching, hoping not to see her. A simple field report had stopped them cold. Smoke seen. No movement. No bodies. Symbol in the sand. She's here. They turned around. They left the planet untouched. In the Galactic Council, leaders from over 30 species sat in silence, staring at one image. A still shot from a battlefield. The Huntress, standing alone, surrounded by fire, and not a scratch on her. One diplomat from the reptilian, Sthera hissed, "She's a myth, a trick." Another alien, covered in golden fur, growled low, "Then why do my soldiers refuse to fight where she's seen?" The human ambassador leaned forward, calm, quiet, "Because she's not a story. She's the truth." Even the Karkal leaders, cold, brutal warlords, began to argue. "We will lose this war if we allow fear to spread," one snarled. "It already has," another whispered. "We are fighting shadows. Our soldiers don't sleep. They shoot at wind. They kill themselves rather than face her." A third slammed his clawed hand on the table. "She is just one human." "Yes," the oldest one said slowly. "But one human is now worth more than 1,000 of ours." Meanwhile, in a hidden bunker far from the front lines, a group of young human soldiers watched her footage. Grainy video. Distant shots. Her walking through smoke. Her slicing through Karkal squads with brutal grace. They were silent. Then one whispered, "She's not like us." A captain turned. She was. Before they took everything from her. Somewhere deep behind enemy lines. The Huntress sat in a broken control tower. Her rifle leaned beside her. Her blade stained. Her coat torn. But her eyes still sharp. She was reading. A Karkal strategy manual. Studying them. Like a teacher studies children. She had learned how they moved, how they planned, and how they panicked. A tiny noise made her glance up. A small Karkal scout, no more than a trainee, was frozen in the doorway, too young to fight, too scared to breathe. She stared at him. He stared back. Then she raised a finger to her lips. "Sheh," and let him live. He ran for hours, all the way back to his camp, collapsed at the gates. When they asked what happened, he said only one thing. "She looked at me, and I forgot how to move." Now, the Huntress didn't need to kill. Her presence did the work. Rumors replaced bullets. Fear replaced orders. Some Karkal soldiers refused to leave their bunkers. Some destroyed their own camps at night, thinking she was already inside. One even shot his own commander, screaming. She's in his eyes. She's inside his head. And yet, the Huntress wasn't hunting blindly. She was heading somewhere. Step by step, planet by planet, trap by trap. She was moving towards something bigger, something hidden, Something the Karkal didn't want anyone to find. A secret, a truth. And in the distance, far beyond the front lines, a strange facility came into view. Underground, guarded, forgotten by most, but not by her. Because here, her war began. And here, it would end. Her past, their mistake. Before the war, before the fear, before the symbol carved in blood and dust, she had another name. She wasn't born on a battlefield. She was born in a small human colony on the edge of space, a quiet place, a forgotten place, with forests that smelled of rain, with skies so clear you could see every star. She had a family there, a little brother who drew spaceships on the walls, a mother who sang old Earth songs while cooking, a father who always smiled until the sky burned. The Karkal didn't just conquer planets. They erased them. No warning, no reason, just fire from above and screams below. She remembered holding her brother's hand in the bunker, whispering, "Don't be scared." But the doors never close, and the monsters came in. She remembered the sound of metal footsteps on stone, the red glow in the dark, her mother's last scream, her father's final breath, and the blood. So much blood. She didn't die that day, but something inside her did. And what replaced it? Not rage, not tears, but silence. A silence that followed her as she crawled out of the ruins, as she wandered, starved and alone, across a dead world. As she was picked up by a scavenger ship and dropped into a refugee camp where no one asked her name. They looked at her and saw a scared girl. They were wrong. She wasn't scared. She was becoming something else. Years passed. She trained in secret, learned from soldiers, smugglers, old warbits. She studied alien weapons, survival tech, field tactics. She listened more than she spoke, watched more than she slept. She turned every weakness into a strength, every scar into armor. Until one day, she vanished, and something new appeared on the battlefields. The Huntress. Now, as she stood outside the old Karkal facility, the memories hit like bullets. She had finally found it. This was the place where it all started. The attack on her colony hadn't been random. It was ordered. From here, the walls of the building were black stone, pulsing with dark energy. The ground trembled slightly, as if the place breathed. It was hidden deep underground, far from maps, far from eyes. And it was guarded, heavily. Dozens of Karkal soldiers stood between her and the doors. But she didn't flinch. This wasn't a mission. This was a return. Inside the control room, a Karkal commander reviewed reports. Sweat dripped down his scaled brow. He had seen the footage. He had heard the screams. And now, the alarms were ringing. Motion sensors. Outer perimeter breached. But no sign of ships. No explosions. Just one alert. Intruder detected. Lone unit. Human. The commander whispered, "No, it can't be." But it was. Outside, in the shadows, she removed her coat. Her blade gleamed under the moonlight. The same blade she had sharpened since that day on her homeworld. Carved with 7 names. Names of the fallen. Names of her family. She whispered them now, one by one. Then she said the last word she'd speak tonight. "I'm here." The facility doors opened. She stepped inside. And the real war began. One by one, the door closed behind her. Darkness swallowed the hallway. No lights. No sounds. No turning back. The Huntress walked forward. Slow. Steady. Certain. Her shadow moved across the cold metal walls like smoke. Every step was planned. Every breath measured. She wasn't just inside a Karkal base. She was inside a machine of genocide. And she was here to shut it down. Security systems activated. Cameras blinked on. Guns aimed. Lasers scanned. Inside the control room, a Karkal officer shouted, "She's here." Trap every level. The commander said nothing. He just stared at the screen. One figure, one human, moving like she had been here before. Because she had. The base was a maze, 3 levels deep, with weapons labs, war vaults, and prison cells. But she didn't wander. She moved with purpose, room by room, corridor by corridor, like she remembered every wall. Because this was the place that planned her colony's death, the place that killed her family, the place that created her. The first squad met her in Sector 1. 6 Karkal elites, heavy weapons, full armor. They were laughing, until they saw her eyes. Not glowing, not angry, just cold. The first died without firing. The second screamed before the blade touched him. The rest tried to run. They didn't make it far. She fought like memory. Every cut was a name. Every bullet was a scream from her past. And when it ended, the floor was painted in silence. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed. The commander panicked. She's cutting off power. She's jamming comms. She knows our layout. Of course she did. Because years ago, as a child, she escaped from here. The Huntress reached the armory. She planted charges, not to escape, to make sure no one else ever used it again. She moved like death with a plan. In the lower levels, she found something unexpected. A prison. Small cages, too small for adults. Inside were children. Alien children. Dirty. Starving. Forgotten. Used for experiments. For training. For pain. She froze. For the first time, she shook. A small hand reached through the bars. A voice. Weak. "Are you the ghost?" She knelt. Touched the hand gently. "No," she said. "I'm the one who kills ghosts." She freed them all. Gave them food from her pack. Water from her flask. Then handed a small detonator to the oldest child. "When you hear silence, press this," she said. "Why?" the child asked. "Because silence means I've already won." Then she turned and walked toward the heart of the base, where the commander waited, where the final files were stored, where the answers lived. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She just walked. Because she knew how this ended. Not with speeches, not with mercy, but with a blade and a name and fire. One by one, they built this place on screams. Now it would fall in silence. The message. The hallway burned behind her. Sparks fell from the ceiling. Smoke danced in the red light. The Huntress walked through it like she was born there. Because in a way, she was. The final door stood ahead. Thick, black, locked. Behind it, the Karkal commander who ordered her family's death, and the servers that stored the truth. She didn't slow down. She placed one explosive on the wall, stepped back, pressed the trigger. Boom. The door didn't just break. It surrendered. Inside, the commander stood alone, claws shaking, weapons ready. But when he saw her, he froze, not because of her weapon, not because of her armor, because of her eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't wild. They were calm, like she'd already won. "You remember me," she said quietly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was loud enough. She stepped forward. He fired. Missed. She didn't. When it was over, she didn't look at his body. She walked past it, found the data core, plugged in her device, downloaded the files. Names, locations, orders, proof, all of it. The things the galaxy needed to see, the things the Union needed to believe. That the Karkal didn't just attack planets. They chose them, tested weapons on civilians, destroyed the weak to train the strong. Her planet had been a test. Her family. Collateral. Now that truth would rise, she returned to the children. They were waiting, holding the detonator, She gave them one look, a nod, then turned her back, walking away into the smoke. One child whispered, "But how will we know when?" Boom! The entire mountain shook. The base rose in fire. Ash rained from the sky. The huntress didn't flinch. She never looked back. A week later, the files were everywhere. Every screen, every station, every Galactic Council table. Video footage, names, documents. The Carcal had no excuse left. Only shame and fear. And then, a final image played. Across every feed, a shaky drone shot. A figure walking out of the flames, covered in dust, coat torn, blade in hand, and behind her, the Carcal flag, burning. She didn't say a word. But across the galaxy, it felt like a shout. In a council meeting, one alien asked, "Is she coming for all of them?" The human ambassador smiled for the first time. "She already has." In a Carcal war camp, a soldier refused to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. He whispered, "She's in the dark. She is the dark." And far, far away, on a quiet world where stars shined clear, a girl with a scared face and a strong heart sat alone, watching the video. She looked at the screen, at the huntress, at the legend, and said, "If she can stand, so can we." One human, one war, one message. We were never weak. You were just blind. The end.